Chapter 9 At-Tawbah, the Repentance. Next verse that discusses Prophet Jesus is found in Surah 9, titled Repentance. This surah was revealed in Medina around the year 631, shortly after the victory of Mecca. This Muslim victory came 8 years after the forced migration of Prophet Muhammad and his followers, leaving behind their families and their belongings. No one at the time could imagine that one man, orphaned and raised by his grandfather, later to become an outcast of his people and tortured for 13 years, could return with the flag of victory, proclaiming the worship of one God. Prophet Muhammad and 10,000 of his followers arrived in Mecca without resistance from the Arabs. There were virtually no casualties. Prophet Muhammad did not retaliate in response to over 20 years of turmoil that the Meccan Arabs wrought. Moreover, those Arabs who did not want to accept Islam were not harmed. On the contrary, they were protected by earlier treaties. The surah does not contain certain passages that are used against Muslims to promulgate the teaching that the Quran commands the killing of infidels. This type of casual reading of the Quran is not appropriate and leads to misinterpretation. It is imperative to know when and under what circumstances a particular passage was revealed. The implementation of such passages was based upon certain conditions. Upon capturing Mecca, Prophet Muhammad reclaimed the worship of one God and removed all idols from the Kaaba. As such, he maintained the sanctity of Mecca, ordering all idol worshippers who did not choose to accept Islam to leave the city within 4 months, or until their treaties with the Muslims expired. If they refused to leave, then the Muslims had the order to expel them from the holy city. It is clear that Prophet Muhammad honored earlier treaties despite having captured the Arab capital. In fact, the year that Mecca was reclaimed from the Abrahamic faith, both Muslims and idolaters worshipped in the city together. However, this was the last and only time that a non-Muslim could enter into Mecca. The same is true of Medina, where the tomb of Prophet Muhammad is located. Muslims consider both Mecca and Medina the 2 holy cities in which Islam has been the only religion practiced for over 1400 years. The application of this passage or any other passage which calls for the killing of non-Muslims is unacceptable. In verse 30, God recounts a sin attributed to the Jews and Christians when they proclaim that God has sons. Verse 30 states, "The Jews call Ezra son of God, and the Christians call the Messiah son of God. That is what they say with their mouths. They imitate the words of those who scoffed before. May God fight them, how deceived they are." Thus far, we have thoroughly discussed the Muslim position that rejects the mainstream Christian belief that Jesus is the Son of God, is incompatible, and stands in contradiction to the first commandment. Declaring a messenger of God to the status of being the Son of God had also been the practice of the Jews. If we examine the Old Testament, it becomes rather clear that throughout their history, the Jews have engaged in idol worship. The idols represent sons and daughters of the divine. Islam denounces this pagan belief adopted by the Jews and later Christians. To their credit, the Jewish people today do not interpret the title of Son of God literally, as the Christians do with Jesus Christ. The use of the phrase Son of God in the Bible refers to angels and the superhuman. For example, in Genesis 6:2 and 6:4, the phrase sons of God is used to refer to angels. Also, in the New Testament, Matthew 5:9, the peacemakers are referred to as sons of God. In both cases, the phrase sons of God does not imply divinity. For the sake of consistency, Christians must reconcile the obvious misinterpretation of this phrase. Certainly, Christians would reject the earlier Jewish position, as posited by the Muslims, that Ezra was the Son of God. Likewise, the Jews would reject the Christian belief that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. In both of these cases, the Quran repeatedly and categorically denies these dogmas. Muslims, since the very beginning, have upheld the oneness of God without any associations.